My name is Rachel, I'm 27 years old, and let me tell you something, nothing stings quite like realizing your own parents see you as their emergency fund. It's the kind of betrayal you don't expect from the two people who raised you, the two people who always claimed they wanted the best for you. I had been saving since I was 19. Every extra shift, every bonus check, every birthday card stuffed with a little bit of cash, I put it all away. I wasn't flashy, I didn't splurge on designer bags or the latest phone. No, I was disciplined, focused. My goal was simple, I wanted to buy a home before I turned 30. I wanted to prove to myself that I could stand on my own 2 feet. But then one evening, while I was scrolling through emails after work, I noticed an alert from my bank. A withdrawal. A big one. $50,000 gone. I froze. At first, I thought it had to be some mistake or maybe fraud. My stomach dropped as I logged in and checked the details. But it wasn't fraud. It wasn't some stranger. The money had been wired directly into my brother Ethan's account. I confronted my parents the next morning, my voice shaking with anger. That's when my mom sat me down like I was a little kid and said, "Your brother was in trouble, Rachel. He needed help. We did what we had to do." My dad stayed quiet, his head low, like he didn't want to face me. I couldn't believe it. That was my money. I worked for it. You had no right. And that's when my mom snapped. She stood up, her face red, and screamed, "Family comes first. You'll understand one day when you have children. Stop being selfish." Selfish. That word burned in my ears. I had just lost $50,000, and somehow I was the selfish one. I remember walking out of their house that day with my hands shaking, but deep down, I knew something had shifted forever. And a month later, when I heard the words, "Your parents owe even more," I didn't flinch. Because by then, I already had a plan. The month that followed felt like I was living in some twisted alternate reality. Every day I woke up angry. Angry at Ethan for being the screw-up he's always been. Angry at my dad for staying silent, never defending me. But most of all, angry at my mom, who not only stole from me but tried to make me feel guilty for being upset about it. I avoided their calls for weeks. I buried myself in work, picking up overtime shifts just to keep my mind from spiraling. My savings account looked like a war zone, everything I'd built over the years wiped out in a single transaction. Buying a home before 30? That dream was gone. Then one night, I was making dinner when my cousin Amanda called. She didn't usually call, she was more of a text person, so I knew something was up. "Ratch, I don't know how to tell you this," she said hesitantly. "But, your parents? They owe money all over town. Not just Ethan's debt. Credit cards, personal loans, everything. I overheard Aunt Linda talking about it. She said they're drowning." I just stared at the phone in silence, trying to process. My parents weren't just bailing Ethan out, they were sinking with him. And in their minds, I was their lifeline. Amanda continued, "Word is, they've even been asking relatives for cash. They think you'll keep covering for them. They think you'll give in again." That's when the knot in my stomach finally untangled into something sharper. Resolve. "I know," I said simply. Amanda was quiet for a second. "Wait, you know?" "Yeah," I replied, lowering my voice. "And I'm not giving them another dime." In that moment, I made a decision. If my parents wanted to treat me like their personal ATM, I'd show them just how wrong they were. I wasn't going to scream or beg. I wasn't going to lecture them about responsibility. No, if they wanted a mess, I'd let them sit in it. And maybe, just maybe, I'd teach them a lesson they'd never forget. Revenge wasn't about yelling. It was about patience. And I was ready to play the long game. Once I made up my mind that I wasn't giving them another cent, my anger started to shift into something sharper, focus. If I was going to play the long game, I needed to understand exactly what I was up against. I didn't call my parents right away. Instead, I started small. I reached out to Ethan. Not directly, because I knew if I texted him he'd either ignore me or beg for more money. No, I waited until I knew he'd be at O'Malley's, this dingy little sports bar he basically lived at. I walked in one evening after work, ordered a drink, and sat near him without saying anything at first. Eventually, he noticed me. His face went pale, like he'd seen a ghost. "Ratch, hey. Didn't expect to see you here." "Yeah," I said calmly, swirling the ice in my glass. "Figured I'd check in. You know, since my savings account went straight into yours." He shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I didn't ask them to do that. Mom insisted. She said you'd understand." I gave him a cold smile. "And do you understand that I worked 8 years for that money?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stared at the TV screen above the bar, pretending to be invested in a baseball game he clearly didn't care about. But he slipped up. In trying to dodge me, he mentioned something about guys breathing down his neck and owing more than he thought. Bingo. That night, I went home and started digging. Public records, online court filings, even social media breadcrumbs. I pieced together a picture of Ethan's mess, gambling debts, payday loans, and God knows what else. But what shocked me more was discovering my parents had taken out a second mortgage on their house last year. They were drowning, and I was the only one who hadn't realized just how deep the water was. And then it hit me, they weren't just careless. They were desperate. But here's the thing about desperate people, they're predictable. And predictable people are easy to outsmart. So instead of confronting them right away, I decided to bide my time. I'd play the good daughter, the one who needed a little space. Meanwhile, I'd be collecting every bit of information I could. Their debts, their spending habits, even the names of the people they owed. Because when I made my move, it wasn't just going to be about getting my money back. It was going to be about making sure they could never use me again. After weeks of silence, I finally decided to call my mom. I could practically feel her relief through the phone when I said, "Hey. I think I overreacted. Maybe we can talk." Her tone softened immediately. "Oh, Rachel, I knew you'd come around. We're family. We can get through this together." That was exactly what I wanted her to think. We arranged dinner at their house that weekend. I walked in smiling, carrying a pie I picked up from the bakery down the street. I played the part of the forgiving daughter, listening patiently as my mom went on about family unity, and my dad muttered vague apologies without ever looking me in the eye. Ethan wasn't there, which made it easier. I didn't trust myself to not bite his head off. Over lasagna and garlic bread, my mom brought it up. "We've been talking, Anne, we might need a little more help. Just until things stabilize." I set my fork down and nodded like I expected it. "I figured. But before I do anything, I'd like to understand what's really going on. I mean, I can't help if I don't know the whole picture." She hesitated for a moment, but then it started spilling out. Credit cards maxed, loan sharks calling Ethan at all hours, late mortgage payments. She spoke like a victim, like all of this had just happened to them, but I knew better. I smiled and said, "Don't worry, Mom. I'll figure something out." Inside, though, I was memorizing every single detail she gave me. I even offered to help organize their bills, which gave me access to account numbers, statements, and balances. They thought I was stepping into the role of family savior. What I was really doing was collecting ammunition. The more I learned, the clearer my plan became. If they wanted to treat me like their lifeline, I'd let them believe it, right up until the moment I pulled the cord. And I wasn't just thinking about protecting myself anymore. I was thinking about revenge, the kind that would sting deep enough to make sure they never saw me as their solution again. I just needed the right timing. And timing, I was learning, was everything. Over the next 2 weeks, I played the role of dutiful daughter perfectly. I stopped by their house every few days, helped them sort through bills, made spreadsheets of their debts, and even called a few creditors on their behalf. My mom gushed about how responsible I was, how I was the only one they could count on. My dad sat there quietly, nodding like a man who'd already accepted he'd lost control years ago. But while they thought I was fixing things, I was really documenting everything. Copies of overdue mortgage notices, bank statements, even the nasty letters from payday loan companies. I scanned it all and tucked it away safely. Ethan was harder to corner. Every time I tried to talk to him, he either vanished or claimed he was working on it. But one night, when he stumbled drunk into my parents' house while I was there, I finally saw his mess up close. He was slurring about a guy named Carl, who wasn't patient anymore. My mom rushed to hush him, shooting me a nervous look. That was when I realized it wasn't just credit card companies. They were tangled up with people who didn't exactly play by the rules. That should have scared me. Instead, it just fueled me. At home, I started crafting what I called my exit strategy. Step 1, quietly move all of my remaining savings into an account they couldn't access. Step 2, get my finances completely untangled from theirs. They still had me listed as an emergency contact on things, and I cut every tie. Step 3, line up my revenge. I wasn't just going to refuse to bail them out. I wanted them to feel the weight of what they'd done, to know that the daughter they dismissed as selfish had outsmarted them. My first move was subtle. I offered to take over paying a couple of their bills online, just to make sure they didn't miss deadlines. They handed me passwords without hesitation. Rookie mistake. Now I had access not only to their accounts but also to their sloppy digital trail. Every secret they thought they were hiding, I had in my hands. And with every new piece of information, my plan sharpened. They thought I was saving them. What they didn't know was that I was already halfway out the door, ready to let their entire house of cards collapse right on top of them. By the third week, I had their full financial map laid out. Every debt, every due date, every desperate payment they'd tried to make. It was like staring at a slow-motion car crash. But instead of swerving to save them, I was tightening the guardrails so the wreck would stay contained on them. The key to my plan was simple: let them believe I was helping while ensuring they'd be the only ones left holding the bag. For starters, I told them I'd spoken to the bank about consolidating their debts. In reality, I made sure nothing went through. I filled out fake applications that I never submitted, nodding along when my mom asked if things were moving forward. Every week she'd say, "So, what did they say?" and I'd smile and reply, "It's processing." She bought it because she wanted to believe it. Then I subtly began pulling myself out of their obligations. My dad had once added me as an authorized user on one of his cards to help build credit. I called the company and shut that down immediately. My name disappeared from everything I could find. No connections, no liabilities, no legal strings tying me to their mess. The final trap was Ethan. I knew he was the real anchor dragging them under, but they kept covering for him. So I flipped it. One night, when he drunkenly left his phone on the counter, I took it for 2 minutes, long enough to snap photos of his threatening texts from Carl and others demanding money. Evidence. If things escalated, my parents couldn't deny who the problem was. When I left that night, my mom hugged me tight and whispered, "You're our rock, Rachel. I don't know what we'd do without you." I hugged her back, smiling in the dark. Oh, you'll find out soon enough, I thought. Because my traps were set. And all I had to do now was wait for the walls to cave in, and make sure I was standing far enough away to watch it happen. It started on a Tuesday evening. I had just settled onto my couch with a glass of wine when my phone buzzed. It was my mom. Her voice was shaky, panicked. "Rachel, some man just came to the door asking about Ethan. He said your brother owes him money and if he doesn't pay soon, things are going to get ugly." I pretended to sound shocked. "Oh my God, Mom. Did you call the police?" No, I didn't," she said quickly, almost as if the idea hadn't crossed her mind. "We don't want trouble." I told him we'd figure something out. Of course she did. That was always her solution: promise money she didn't have. I kept my voice calm and soothing. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll look into it. Maybe I can talk to Ethan. I had no intention of doing that. By Friday, things escalated. My dad called me this time, which was rare. His voice was tired, defeated. Ratch, the mortgage company called. We're months behind. They're threatening foreclosure. I stayed quiet for a long moment, letting the silence eat at him. Finally, I said, Dad. I told you. I don't have that kind of money anymore. He didn't argue. He just sighed, a hollow sound, and muttered, I know. That weekend, I stopped by their house to keep up appearances. The tension was thick, you could feel it in the air. My mom was snapping at my dad was glaring at Ethan, and Ethan was pacing like a trapped animal. At one point, Ethan turned to me and snarled, You're supposed to be helping. What are you even doing? I just smiled sweetly and said, exactly what I said I would. He didn't understand what I meant, but my mom immediately jumped in to scold him. Don't you dare talk to your sister like that. She's the only one trying to help us. I bit back a laugh. They really believed it. But behind my calm exterior, I knew things were reaching a breaking point. Creditors were circling, the mortgage was dangling by a thread, and Ethan's shady friends were getting restless. All I had to do was keep the act up a little longer, and then step aside when it all came crashing down. The storm hit faster than I expected. One Saturday morning, I was sipping coffee when Amanda, my cousin, texted me, Cops are at your parents' house. My heart gave a little jump, not fear, but anticipation. I grabbed my keys and drove over. By the time I got there, 2 squad cars were parked out front, lights flashing. My mom was standing on the porch in her robe, crying and clutching at one of the officers' arms. My dad sat on the steps, head in his hands. And Ethan was being shoved into the back of a cruiser in handcuffs. Apparently, one of his creditors had pressed charges for fraud, fake checks, unpaid loans. The whole thing unraveled in front of me. Rachel, my mom wailed when she saw me. Do something. Please, help your brother. I kept my face carefully neutral. What exactly do you want me to do, Mom? This is between him and the police. Her expression twisted, part rage, part desperation. You've been helping us. You said. I said I'd organize things, I cut in sharply. I never said I'd cover for Ethan's crimes. The officer glanced at me with raised eyebrows, then back at Ethan. My brother shot me a glare so venomous it could have killed, but I held it. For once, he was powerless. After they drove him away, my mom collapsed into a chair on the porch, sobbing. They're going to take the house, Rachel. We can't keep this up. And that's when I let my mask slip, just a little. I crouched down in front of her, lowering my voice so only she could hear. You know, Mom, you called me selfish. You took everything I worked for, and you didn't even ask. You treated me like a piggy bank, not a daughter. Well, now you get to live with the choices you made. Her tears froze midstream. She looked at me, eyes wide, as if seeing me for the first time. I stood up, brushed the dust off my jeans, and said, I hope you figure it out. But this time? You're on your own. Then I walked away, leaving her stunned and silent behind me. The explosion had happened, and I wasn't caught in the fire. After Ethan's arrest, I didn't visit my parents' house for a while. I needed space. Space to breathe, space to remind myself that I wasn't responsible for cleaning up their chaos anymore. But they didn't let me disappear so easily. My phone started buzzing constantly, calls, voicemails, desperate texts. My mom would say things like, Rachel, we're drowning, please answer. Or, you don't understand, we could lose everything. My dad was quieter, but when he did text, it was short and guilt-soaked, please don't abandon us. I ignored most of it. The only time I picked up was when Amanda called, because I knew she'd give me the unfiltered version of what was going on. Your parents are scrambling, she said one evening. They've been calling everyone in the family, asking for money. Aunt Linda hung up on them. Uncle Frank told them to get lost. No one's stepping in this time. That was when I realized, my parents had burned through every bridge, not just with me. Still, the guilt tugged at me, just a little. These were the people who raised me, after all. But then I'd remember my mom's face that day she screamed at me, calling me selfish while pocketing my dreams. That memory was my anchor. To make sure I stayed firm, I doubled down on my exit strategy. I updated my phone plan, blocked their access to my financial accounts permanently, and even had a lawyer draft a simple letter removing me from any liability they might try to pin on me. It was cold, maybe, but necessary. The next time my mom managed to get through to me, she was hysterical. "Rachel, the bank is going to take the house. We need you to co-sign a loan, just this once. Please." My chest tightened, but I forced myself to stay calm. "No, Mom. I'm done. I'm not tying myself to your mess anymore." Her sobs turned into sharp, angry breaths. "After everything we did for you as a child, this is how you repay us?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Funny, you said family comes first. But you never treated me like family. You treated me like a wallet. Now it's time for you to stand on your own." I hung up before she could answer. And for the first time in months, I felt free. The foreclosure notice came 3 weeks later. Amanda sent me a picture of it taped to my parents' front door, bold red letters spelling final warning. Their house, the one I grew up in, was slipping through their fingers. It should have broken me to see it. But instead, I felt strangely detached. I guess that's what happens when you've already mourned the loss of trust long before the house ever became a casualty. My parents called me that night. For once, it wasn't my mom leading the charge, it was my dad. His voice was hollow, tired. "Rachel, we're losing everything. They gave us 30 days. We don't have anywhere to go." I sat there in silence for a few seconds. Part of me wanted to comfort him. But then I remembered all the years he stood in the background, letting Mom make decisions that hurt me, never once standing up for me. Finally, I said, "I'm sorry, Dad. But this is the result of choices you both made. I can't save you." He didn't argue. He just sighed and whispered, "I understand," before hanging up. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and opened my laptop, not to search for ways to help them, but to finally refocus on myself. I signed up for a first-time homebuyer seminar. I mapped out a savings plan, smaller than the one I'd had before, but still mine. And I promised myself that every dollar I saved would go toward my future, not theirs. Meanwhile, word spread quickly through town. People whispered about Ethan's arrest, about my parents' debts. For once, the shame wasn't mine to carry, it was theirs. And instead of swooping in to shield them, I let it happen. I wasn't cruel about it. I didn't gloat. But I also didn't protect them. They had built this mess brick by brick. And now, they were living inside the collapse. For me, though, it was the first time I truly felt like I was standing outside of it, free to start over. The day of the foreclosure came like a funeral. I didn't go, but Amanda texted me updates. Movers hauling boxes, neighbors standing on the sidewalk whispering, my mom sobbing as she clutched a box of family photo albums. By the evening, my childhood home was empty. My parents had lost it all. I thought I'd feel triumphant. For months, I'd dreamed about this moment, the day when they'd finally face the consequences of their choices. But as I sat in my apartment scrolling through Amanda's photos, a strange heaviness settled in my chest. This was justice, yes. But it was also grief. Grief for the family I thought I had, for the parents I wished they could have been. The calls didn't stop, though. That night, my mom left me a voicemail that I still haven't deleted. Her voice was cracked and raw. "Rachel, we don't have anywhere to go. We're staying at a motel for now, but we can't afford this for long. Please, please, you're our daughter. Don't abandon us." I sat there listening in the dark, torn between the girl who still wanted her parents' love and the woman who finally understood how toxic they were. And that's when it hit me: revenge doesn't come without a cost. I wasn't just punishing them, I was cutting myself loose. That meant no more illusions, no more pretending that if I just worked harder or gave more, they'd change. It hurt like hell. But it was also freeing. So I made a choice: I wouldn't rescue them. But I also wouldn't let their collapse consume me. My energy needed to go somewhere better. The next morning, I made a down payment on a small lot outside of town, nothing fancy, just a start. It wasn't the house I once dreamed of, but it was mine. My future, my way. As for my parents, they were officially homeless, broke, and alone. And for the first time in my life, I realized that wasn't my responsibility anymore. A few weeks passed after the foreclosure, and for the first time in years, my life felt like it was mine again. I threw myself into work, started putting money back into my savings, and even began sketching out what I wanted for that little lot I'd bought. It wasn't much yet, but when I stood there in the quiet, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Meanwhile, my parents drifted further down. Amanda kept me updated, even when I didn't ask. "They're living in one of those long-term motels off the highway," she said. "Your mom's been calling everyone for money. No one's helping. People are tired of it." Hearing that still twisted something inside me. But I forced myself to remember, every call for help was really another way of saying, we refuse to take responsibility. Then Ethan came back into the picture. I hadn't seen him since the night of his arrest. But one Friday evening, as I was unlocking my apartment door, I heard a voice behind me. "Ratch." I turned, and there he was, gaunt, tired, but still carrying that same restless energy. For a second, I didn't recognize him. Jail had aged him years. "What are you doing here?" I asked sharply. I needed to see you. Mom and Dad, they're a mess. And me," he trailed off, rubbing the back of his neck. "I know I screwed everything up. I know I dragged everyone down. But I'm trying to change." I crossed my arms, studying him. Part of me wanted to believe him, but I'd learned better. He shifted nervously. "Look, I'm not asking for money. I swear. I don't want to be like them. I don't want to end up with nothing. You're the only one who seems to have it together." For a moment, I saw a flicker of the brother I used to look up to, before gambling and lies consumed him. But I also knew better than to let sentiment cloud my judgment. "Ethan," I said finally, "if you want to change, then do it. But don't expect me to hold your hand. I've spent enough of my life paying for other people's mistakes." He nodded slowly, like he'd expected that answer. "Fair enough." Then he turned and walked away, leaving me with a pit in my stomach. Because deep down, I wasn't sure if he was telling the truth, or just setting me up for the next crash. Ethan's visit left me unsettled, and I had this gnawing feeling it wouldn't be the last time. I was right. 2 weeks later, my mom called me in tears, again. But this time, the crying wasn't about bills or the house. It was about Ethan. "He showed up at the motel drunk," she sobbed. "He was yelling, banging on the door, threatening us when we wouldn't give him cash. Rachel, he's out of control. What do we do?" I bit back the bitter laugh rising in my throat. Now she saw it. Now, when he was terrorizing them, she wanted to admit he was a problem. When it was just me being drained, I was the selfish one for saying no. "I don't know, Mom," I said flatly. "Maybe the same thing I did, stop enabling him." She gasped like I'd slapped her. "You can't mean that. He's your brother. We can't just give up on him." I closed my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose. "You already gave up on me when you drained my savings to cover his debts. Don't ask me to carry him again. I'm done." Silence. Then a shaky whisper, "You've changed." I almost laughed. "No, Mom," I thought. "I just finally stopped playing the fool." Later that week, Ethan showed up at my apartment again. This time, I didn't let him get past the door. He tried the same speech, how he wanted to change, how he just needed a little help getting started. I cut him off. No. If you're serious about getting clean, you'll figure it out without me. If you're here to drag me down, don't come back. His eyes hardened, and for a second I thought he might explode. But then he just smirked, muttered, "You always thought you were better than us," and walked away. I leaned against the closed door after he left, shaking. It was one thing to cut ties with my parents. But Ethan was the kind of person who didn't just sink on his own, he dragged everyone nearby down with him. And I had a sinking feeling this wasn't the last time I'd have to face him. It was a rainy Thursday night when the final straw broke. I was home, curled up with paperwork for my new lot, when the pounding started on my door. Not knocking, pounding. I knew before I even looked through the peephole who it was. Ethan. Rachel. Open the damn door. His voice was slurred, angry. I know you're in there. My stomach dropped, but I stood firm. I cracked the door chain just enough to see him, soaked, wild-eyed, swaying on his feet. What do you want? I asked coldly. I need money, he snapped, as if it were the most reasonable thing in the world. Carl's after me again. If I don't pay him tonight, I'm screwed. You've got it, just give me something. Something inside me hardened. No, Ethan. Not anymore. I told you, I'm done. His face twisted with rage. He shoved against the door, rattling the chain. You selfish bitch. You think you're better than us, sitting in here with your little savings, while your family's out there drowning? My hands trembled, but I didn't flinch. Better than you? No. Smarter than you? Absolutely. He froze, stunned by my words. Then he spat on the ground, muttered something under his breath, and stormed off into the rain. I didn't sleep much that night. My heart pounded for hours, replaying the scene in my head. But beneath the fear was something stronger, resolve. The next morning, I changed my locks. Then I filed for a restraining order. It felt brutal, cutting ties with my own brother like that. But I knew if I didn't, he'd drag me right back into the hole I'd fought so hard to climb out of. And that was the line for me. I wasn't going back. Not for him. Not for my parents. Not for anyone. The door was shut, and this time, it was locked for good. 6 months later, I stood on the edge of my little plot of land, watching the foundation being poured. It wasn't the dream house I once thought I'd have by 30, but it was mine. Every penny going into it came from my work, my choices, my discipline, not stolen from me under the banner of family obligation. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. My parents, well, they'd landed in a cramped apartment across town, still juggling bills, still making excuses. Amanda told me they were quieter now, humbled in a way. I didn't check in. I didn't need to. They made their bed, and now they had to sleep in it. Ethan disappeared not long after that night at my door. Rumor had it he left town, maybe chasing another gamble, maybe running from Carl. Either way, he wasn't my problem anymore. Sometimes, late at night, I'd lie awake and wonder if I'd been too harsh. After all, these were my parents. This was my brother. Shouldn't I have tried harder? But then I'd remember standing in their kitchen, hearing my mom scream, selfish, at me while my life savings sat in Ethan's account. I'd remember the motel calls, the guilt trips, the pounding on my door. And I'd remind myself, boundaries aren't cruelty. They're survival. My revenge hadn't been about shouting or getting even. It was about walking away, letting them face the consequences of their own choices. It was about finally refusing to be the scapegoat, the savior, the bank. The day the first wall went up on my house, I stood there with tears in my eyes, not from sadness, but from pride. My parents had taken $50,000 from me. They'd stolen years of savings, years of sacrifice. But they hadn't broken me. Instead, I'd rebuilt. Stronger. Smarter. Untouchable. And that was the sweetest revenge of all.